Saudi Arabia says it is moving closer to normalizing ties with Israel. Riyadh's newly appointed envoy has met with the Palestinian Authority and said they are working towards a Palestinian state. But can they keep that promise while pulling off what the Crown Prince says would be the most significant deal since the end of the Cold War? I'm Hazem Sika, and today's newsmaker is Saudi-Israel relations. Saudi Arabia has sent high-level representatives to the occupied West Bank for the first time since Israel captured the territory from Jordan in the 1967 war. The move is widely seen as a clear sign that an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel to normalize relations is getting closer. Israel controls the border Naif Sudari used to cross into the West Bank and would have authorized his arrival. Saudi Arabia, along with other Arab states, has pledged for decades they would not recognize Israel without a just settlement for Palestinians. So can Saudi Arabia satisfy these long-term promises? And would a deal with Israel pave the way for meaningful talks between Israel and the Palestinians suspended since 2014?
I'm proud to be in my country, Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, God willing. Hopefully next time or next times, we will go together to Jerusalem. I'm proud to be here today to submit my credentials as an ambassador for the custodian of the two holy mosques and a general consul in Jerusalem.
Now, the Biden administration has made it clear that normalizing of ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel is a top U.S. foreign policy priority. The talks have been going on for months, but were only acknowledged by the Saudi Crown Prince for the first time in an interview last week. Mohammed bin Salman said he hopes a deal would ease life for Palestinians, but stopped short of calling for an independent Palestinian state. In return for recognizing Israel, Riyadh is seeking U.S. concessions in the form of security guarantees and help with its civilian nuclear program. Now, that is fueling concerns of an arms race with Iran.
What would it take for you to agree to normalize relations with Israel?
Well, there is approach from President Biden administration to get to that point. For us, the Palestinian issue is very important. We need to solve that part, and we have a good negotiations continue till now. We gotta see where it will go. We hope that it will reach a place that it will ease the life of the Palestinians and get Israel back, as a player in Middle East.
Israeli officials have also expressed optimism a deal is close, and the tourism minister became the country's first cabinet member to lead an official delegation to Saudi Arabia. Haim Katz said he would hold talks with several Arab countries. If a deal is struck with Saudi Arabia, Israel would benefit from trade and defense ties with the Gulf superpower and would be further integrated in the region, following on from the Abraham Accords in 2020. But the granting of any Palestinian concessions would face strong opposition in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right ultra-nationalist government. Members of his cabinet have sanctioned the Palestinian Authority and openly called for the annexation of parts of the occupied West Bank.
The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace. But I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Such a peace will go a long way to ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. It will encourage other Arab states to normalize their relations with Israel. It will enhance the prospects of peace with the Palestinians.
Palestinian Authority officials have reportedly told the Saudi leader they want more control in the occupied West Bank and an end to illegal Israeli outposts. They also want the reopening of the U.S. consulate in occupied East Jerusalem, which former U.S. President Donald Trump closed in 2019, and for the U.S. to back full Palestinian representation at the United Nations. In a bid to win over the Palestinian Authority, Saudi Arabia has offered to resume financial support after aid dropped to zero in 2021. Palestinians live under an open-ended Israeli military occupation in the West Bank and an Israeli-Egyptian blockade in Gaza. In March this year, Saudi Arabia struck a landmark deal re-establishing diplomatic ties with regional rivals Iran, ending nearly 8 years of hostility. That deal was brokered by China. But last week, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi warned Saudi Arabia against any deal with Israel.
We believe that a relationship between regional countries and the Zionist regime would be a step in the back of the Palestinian people and of the resistance of the Palestinians. People of our region will in no way accept that the Islamic countries pay little attention to the sacred principle of the Palestinian people, because the issue of Palestine and the liberation of Holy Jerusalem is still the core issue of the Muslim world.
Well, for more on Saudi Arabia and Israel's ties, we are joined by Chaz Freeman, a former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, as well as the former president of the Middle East Policy Council. He joins us from Rhode Island. From Tel Aviv, we have Kobi Michael, a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies and the former head of the Palestinian desk at the Israeli Strategic Affairs Ministry. And from Brussels is Joost Hiltermann, the program director of the Middle East and North Africa at the International Crisis Group. Good to have you all with us, gentlemen. So Chaz Freeman, a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel could be a real game changer in the Middle East if it happens. But it does seem a long way off still, doesn't it, despite what all the parties are saying?
I don't think there will be a broad peace deal. I think we live in a world in which transactional diplomacy is the norm. And in this case, the Saudis will take whatever they can get from Israel, and more particularly from the United States. They are transitioning to a more diversified international posture, but they want to hold on to their defense relationship with the United States. And they're very aware that Mr. Biden, our president, is very eager to ingratiate himself with Jewish donors in the United States. So I think they are trying to take everything they can get from this. And some of the things that are on the table transactionally have just been illustrated with the visit by Minister Katz, Minister for Tourism, to Saudi Arabia. One of the things the Saudis can get from Israel is tourists. I think they can get a lot of other things. I don't think there will be a broad peace because the central issue in Saudi politics is the Palestinian issue. And the Israeli effort, of course, is to achieve an Arab-Israeli reconciliation without dealing with Palestinian self-determination. So under these circumstances, we will see bits and pieces of a relationship constructed, but no broad peace.
Kobi Michael, you share that assessment. This is largely a transactional relationship more than one that's sort of based on principle.
Not necessarily. I do agree that it will not be a broad and a warm peace and relations like the relations that we have according to the Abraham Accords with the Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Morocco. But it is still an anchor of new regional architecture that will be a game changer in the politics of the broader Middle East. And I think that the Saudis are paying much more lip service with regard to the Palestinians rather than real interest in the Palestinians. The Saudis perceive themselves as the leaders of the Arab world and the leaders of the Sunni Islam world, and therefore they have to do something with regard to the Palestinians. But I do believe that they will find the right way to reach to a reasonable understanding with Israel and with the American administration with regard to the Palestinian arena. And I do believe that this time the Palestinian leadership will not repeat the strategic mistake that they did with regard to the Abraham Accords, because they understand that they lost their veto power, and they will try to leverage this agreement for their purposes, for their interests, and they are much more modest in comparison to their demands during the era of Abraham Accords.
Joost Hiltermann, where do you see all of this? Is this something that it could ultimately be good for the broader Middle East, or will it essentially solidify alliances and thereby divisions in the region?
So I tend to also be very skeptical that there will be a broad peace, certainly at this stage or in the near future. I tend to agree with Kobi Michael that the Saudis are playing lip service toward the Palestinian case, and they may well try to throw the Palestinians under the bus in a final deal if the other terms are good, especially on the nuclear front and US security guarantees. But the question is whether they can get away with it and whether that would end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'm very skeptical that it would. So even if the Saudis and the Israelis come to a deal that takes into account the Palestinians, but maybe on the economic front, this will not lead to peace, because an economic peace has been tried for decades and has never worked with the Palestinians, and it will not work this time. The other factor is that the Palestinian leadership is no longer accepted in the occupied territories or beyond. And so they cannot deliver any deal anyway. And those who are resisting Israeli occupation are not the Palestinian leadership. So you still have to deal with those people, which is the vast majority of Palestinians. In terms of the region, the lines are clearly drawn, already were before, and more clearly maybe after a possible deal, which means that Iran and those who reject a deal with Israel stand on one side, and Saudi Arabia, the Emirates on the other. The thing is, the division is not just between Iran and the Arab states, it's between Iran and the Arab states, but also between the Arab states and their own people. Because the people of Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries are not in favor of a deal with Israel. And we've already seen that to the extent that Israel has normalized relations with the Emirates and with Morocco, tourism is a one-way street. No people from the Arab world are readily going to Israel, not because there's no beautiful beaches or whatnot, but because they don't want to go.
Yeah, let's explore that a little bit more with Chaz Freeman. I mean, it's, when you talk to a lot of people in the region, Arabs as well as Israelis, they will say that these kind of agreements are very beneficial at the leadership level, at the regime level, but they don't do much for people on the ground, and that the sort of the enmity that often has existed between people in the region will not change, and the prospects, particularly for people in the Arab world, for any meaningful change on the ground will also not change as a result of any agreement like this. What do you say to that?
Well, I think there is, in fact, really a serious split between the leadership on all three sides and popular opinion. In Israel, there's a coalition which contains people who are deeply opposed to any concessions on the main issues, whether it's nuclear or the Palestinian issue. In Saudi Arabia, as in the UAE, the Abraham Accords are deeply unpopular. Popular opinion is a constraint on action. And as Joost Hiltermann mentioned, the Palestinian leadership does not have the confidence or support of most Palestinians. So the ability of each of these parties to make concessions is deeply constrained.
Kobi Michael, what do you think this means for ordinary Arabs and Israelis?
Look, I think that even with the initiating the normalization process between Israel and the Saudis, it will not resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. but it will improve dramatically the current reality. Because by creating the new regional architecture, actually we are enlarging the pie. The bilateral level between Israel and the Palestinians actually exhausted itself. Both sides are not able to bridge the gaps between of them. But the new regional architecture will enlarge the pie by adding much more resources, players, and interests to the arena, and by enlarging the pie, actually both sides will be able to be compensated for further concessions and flexibilities, and they will be able to do things that they are not able to do now in the bilateral level between of them. And in this regard, I do believe that the normalization process will contribute positively to the Israeli-Palestinian issue, although it will not resolve the conflict, not in the very soon future. But in the very same time, I must add and say that we have a very significant spoiler, which is Hamas. And Hamas is sort of an Iranian proxy, unfortunately, these days, together with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And Iran, with its proxies, has an interest to sabotage any sort of normalization process, and they will do all the possible efforts in order to do that. And I think that this will be the truth moment for Israel and for its neighbors to do something with regard to Hamas, because there is a zero-sum game between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, which means stronger Hamas is weaker Palestinian Authority. And if we want to strengthen the Palestinian Authority and to assure that it will be a component of the new regional architecture, we have to weaken Hamas. To weaken Hamas, it means that we have to deal with the military infrastructures of Hamas in the Gaza Strip and in other places.
Just to pick up on some of that, Kobi Michael, if you say that any kind of agreement could work towards strengthening the Palestinian Authority, what is that going to mean for all ordinary Palestinians who are living through the daily grind of occupation and checkpoints and continued building of Jewish settlements in the West Bank? If agreements like this aren't going to change any of that for them, then what good does it serve?
It will change. I think that you have a wrong assumption. It will change because one of the first things that Israel will be obliged to do is, first of all, to freeze all the building in the settlements and to dismantle all the illegal outposts. And this is something that, of course, will contribute positively to the daily life of the Palestinians. But we have to remember that, as I said before, there are many other options. Let's just, for an example, take the idea of the option that will be opened for educated and very well-skilled Palestinians, the Palestinian youngsters who are now very frustrated because they can do almost nothing in the Palestinian territories because the Palestinian economy is very limited and the Palestinian Authority functionality is in a very low level. But once we have a new regional structure, all the Saudi market will be opened to these educated Palestinians. I would like to remind us all what was in Kuwait till the Iraqi invasion in August 90, okay? More than 400,000 Palestinians actually holded all the Kuwaitian economy. And they transferred a lot of money to their families in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. And the Saudi economy is much bigger and larger than the economy of Kuwait. And I think that the Saudis are seeking to have well-skilled people that will contribute to the Saudi economy and to the Saudi education system, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I want to move on to one of the other major issues in any agreement here, which involves Saudi Arabia, specifically Saudi Arabia and the US, and that's the nuclear technology assistance to Saudi Arabia that the US may be offering to Riyadh as part of any deal. Put that to Joost Hiltermann. What are the implications of that, particularly security concerns of that going forward?
Well, of course, there are many concerns in the region about nuclear proliferation. So whether it's Saudi Arabia or Turkey or the UAE, who are developing nuclear power in response to Israel having nuclear weapons, and Iran developing a nuclear program that is probably military or could be turned into a military program. This is a huge problem. So the United States would not want that. Israel for sure would not want it. And in fact, it's one of the two main obstacles for Israel to normalization with Saudi Arabia, unless this can be resolved. And the only way that particular aspect can be resolved is through some American guarantees. They would have to be watertight. And I very much doubt that these exist, because they can be watertight for a time, and then maybe with a new administration, suddenly they wouldn't be. And so from the Israeli perspective, I have a hard time seeing how they could accept any form of nuclear developments in Saudi Arabia, even with US guarantees. But I want to also, if you don't mind, go back to the Palestinian question, because for Israel this is the second main obstacle, and I don't see, frankly, how Israel can make a deal with Saudi Arabia that goes as far as stopping outposts and dismantling settlements, and even moving toward a two-state solution as the Saudis are asking. And this government in Israel not falling, or any other government in Israel not even coming together or falling, because this is a divisive issue, highly divisive issue. And it goes completely contrary to the Israeli establishment agenda when it comes to the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. So I really cannot see that. So I'll leave it at that.
Unfortunately, we've lost our connection to Joost Hiltermann, but we will push on with the discussion for now. Chaz Freeman, as far as this issue of the nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia, the critics will say that this runs counter to the Biden administration's stated goal of promoting democracy across the world.
I think we have to be realistic. The Saudis have made three essential demands. One we've discussed, which is progress on the Palestinian front. But the other two are a defense treaty, an absolute American guarantee of Saudi defense, and this nuclear fuel cycle, complete nuclear fuel cycle, including reprocessing. I don't think either of those have any prospect at all of being approved in the US Senate or the Congress. Saudi Arabia is deeply unpopular. Israel itself is increasingly unpopular in the United States. Mr. Netanyahu, among his many achievements, can take credit for making it a partisan issue for the first time. Republicans tend to be pro-Israeli. Democrats now increasingly are not. So I think this is politically very, very difficult. And we're talking about trying to do this. Mr. Biden is trying to do this as he runs up to an election in 2024. So I don't think this is going to happen.
Kobi Michael, what's your view on that and the security concerns that Israel might have about an agreement like this?
I think that Israel is not too happy about the idea of nuclearization of Saudi Arabia. But I do believe that the level of the Israeli motivation, mainly the motivation of Prime Minister Netanyahu, is so high with regard to this agreement, because he believes that this is a real game changer for Israel and for the region, that I believe that he will be able to convince the security establishment, and the main problem is the security establishment, not the political establishment. I do believe that he will be able to convince the security establishment to find a way together with the Americans to provide, I would say, reliable guarantees to Israel with regard to the American control over the process as a whole, I mean the enrichment, and maybe even the Saudis will be willing to make sort of a compromise, and the Israelis and the Americans will come with a very, I would say, creative initiative or idea that will convince the Saudis to make a sort of a compromise in this regard. But as far as I understand Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli politics, I do believe that this will not be, at the end of the day, the major obstacle in front of the realization of this process from the Israeli point of view.
All right, on that, we're going to have to leave it there. Chaz Freeman, Kobi Michael, and Joost Hiltermann, thanks very much for being with us. And thank you, as always, for watching. Remember, you can follow us on X. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Hazem Seeker. We'll see you next time.